Can you describe the first inpatient and outpatient bronchoscopy you went through after transplant?
The first bronchoscopy that I went through after transplant, it was kind of hard like that, that they came in, they told me what was going to happen, and I think the surgeons did it the first time, and they were, I don't think they used enough anesthesia, but they got in there and they told me exactly what was going to happen, and it happened, and it was an eye-opener, I guess you can say. It was kind of difficult, but then after the first one, the second one, the third one, and I forget how many I had after. I've had quite a few. It got easier, and right now it's just, I'm not saying it's a walk in the park, but it's not nearly as bad as when I first got after transplant. The first outpatient bronchoscopy that I had, it was, fairly good. I don't remember, to be honest with you, like this, but I don't, it's not something that I dread. It's come in here and get it taken care of, and usually you're out here in 3 or 4 hours and you're done. Afterwards, you kind of rest a little bit, but that they, it's done very well, in my opinion.
Well, I was in intensive care when they came, and I had pneumonia in my lungs, so they gave me my bronchoscopy while I was sitting straight up in bed, and I was awake, and I got to watch the whole thing on camera for about 4 times, and so it was painless, and there was no problem at all. Now when I have the bronchoscopies on outpatient, they put me out, so I don't even know what's happening now. So it's just routine.
In my opinion, one of the myths of the transplant process is the horror that people talk about with bronchs or bronchoscopies. And so I was very, very reluctant and a little frightened about it, even though I knew I had to have bronchs. And they are not bad at all. I was very, very surprised how simple they were, candidly, and I attribute that to the staff, the doctors and the staff that performed the bronchoscopy were fantastic. And it was not painful. And I tried to have every experience that I went through be a learning experience. So I asked them to really verbalize what they were seeing, what it meant to them, and to take pictures so that I would have a record of that process. And it was very helpful. So I was not worried about what was happening to me. I was more interested in what they were saying, and they were learning and telling me. So, I'm not going to say it was a wonderful experience, but it was not near the horror stories that I'd heard about bronchs.
It was awful. It was painful. I was still in ICU. I was afraid. I didn't know what was going to happen. And but other than that, you got used to it. Yeah, Dr. Bush was there, Dr. Golden was there, and they walked me through everything. Yeah, but it is sort of scary. Yeah. They're good. The technicians, everyone that has worked with me, they are so professional, so skilled. They know when to stop if you're not going to be able to receive the medication. Once you get over the fear that you're okay, I think it's the fear of, am I really okay? Is this real? And once you get over that, everything goes pretty well.
The outpatient bronchoscopies are, when I first started in my post-transplant surveillance, there was a series of tests that you went through, and normally the bronchoscopy would be at the end of the day or at the end of the period because you'd be sedated, and so naturally you wanted to go home after that. Fortunately, since it's one of the least pleasant aspects of post-transplant life, you're sedated for it, so you don't remember too much of it. I did have a complication in a bronchoscopy one time, and I had some bleeding in a lung, and I had to be hospitalized overnight for that. But, I went home the next day with no further complication of that. And as a result of that, however, we discovered that I had a slight bleeding disorder. But basically, once again, you discover how there's a whole system here in place from everyone who will be working with you the day of your bronchoscopy knows who you are, knows why you're here, and knows, better than you do, knows what to expect, including the recovery room nurse.
My first inpatient bronchoscopy was a pretty scary experience. I'd never had one before, and it was 2 or 3 days after my surgery. It was in my ICU room, and I wasn't sedated, so it was pretty traumatic, and it was pretty scary. But I can't say it was super painful. It was just very uncomfortable, and because I didn't know what to expect, I think I was just a bit in shock. Dr. Golden had assured me that my first outpatient bronchoscopy would be a fine experience, that I actually would have no issues with it and that I would be comfortable. And I had a hard time believing him because my inpatient experience was so challenging, but he was completely right. Between the nurses and the doctors and the really good sedation, I was able to go through that experience, and I found it as enjoyable as you can find a bronchoscopy, and now I've had, maybe 30 or 40 of them, and they've all gone really smoothly.
I can. Actually, I think I did pretty good with my bronchoscopy. I wanted to see it, so I watched, and it wasn't that bad for me, to be honest with you. I watched. It was. I remember there being people in the room that I knew and trusted, medical staff that I knew and trusted. They just told me to relax and let it happen, and I did. And being me, I wanted to see everything that was happening, so I watched. To be honest, I think they give you first aid, and I don't often remember those. I go into the room, meet the nice, lovely people. They tell me what they're about to do. They spray my throat with some nasty Novocaine or something. I don't know what it is. And then they start giving me the happy stuff so I can relax a little bit. And then I wake up, and I don't remember it. So it is not bad at all.
My first bronchoscopy in the hospital was a little bit frightening. The staff that was traveling with the little mobile bronchoscopy machine was Maggie and Mike, and I think a lot of people from those years will remember Maggie and Mike. They were awesome, and they made you feel very comfortable. Dr. Leard was the first one to do one for me, and she was awesome as well. And it was uncomfortable, but it was not painful. There was a little bit of gagging that could not be avoided because you're awake. There's no sedation involved. So honestly, when I had my first bronchoscopy as an outpatient in the hospital, that was a treat because I didn't gag. I had no idea what was going on, and the team, Chio and every of the other RNs that were in there helping me out, they were fantastic. They made me comfortable. They talked to me like an equal, and it was really nice.
The first inpatient bronchoscopy I had was done by, I think he was a fellow. I don't think he was a resident. And then I can't remember his name. He was very nice. And of course I was nervous, scared, but he explained everything, and they had a big cart with a monitor, so I could see out of the corner of my eye, when he did the bronchoscopy as he's going down. But it's not a pleasant thing. I mean, they do numb your throat with, like a lidocaine spray, and it is uncomfortable, but it's just that it's just one of the things that you have to do. The outpatient was totally different because they give you IV meds to relax you. And the staff there was nice. And it was, the only thing with each bronchoscopy was when they spray your throat with the lidocaine as they go further and further down with spraying, you may get a little gag reflex or cough. But other than that, it was not that bad. Like I said, the outpatient was easier.
My first inpatient bronchoscopy, I think, was a couple days after coming out of the transplant. It's a little foggy. I know I was in the ICU for about 9 days. So I think it was a couple days. But I remember the gentleman who came in, I don't remember his name, but he had like this bald head and he had a great demeanor about him and was like, hey, this is what's happening. So I just took deep breaths. They go up through your nose and down your throat, and you can kind of watch it on a little screen and everything. And I think it didn't really bother me. They numb your throat and everything, and it was kind of neat to be able to see like what's going on in there now. So it made me feel more at ease almost. And as long as you take deep breaths, and just focus on not gagging, it's fine. It wasn't painful for me at all. Your throat's a little scratchy, but it was no big deal. And then my first outpatient, it's a little more intensive. They numb your throat a bunch, and then they also give you medication like Versed or something to relax you, because they're going in and taking biopsies too, so they're pulling out a little bit of tissue. So I think that's why it's more of a process. And that's not bad at all, because you kind of don't remember it. And the people there are super nice, and they make sure that you're comfortable and everything. So I actually was a little upset when I wasn't able to get bronchs anymore, because I liked knowing that everything was good in there, that my biopsies were coming back, negative, and that I didn't, because they'll suck like any mucus that might be in there that if you can't cough it up, so they'll kind of clean everything up in there, which is kind of nice. So I was actually a little bummed when they were like, oh, you don't need bronchoscopies anymore. So my experiences were pretty good with them.
The first inpatient bronchoscopy that I recall was such an amazing experience, because I remember thinking, those are my new lungs. They're beautiful. They're pink. They're healthy. I could see things moving, and it was just an amazing experience. I will tell you that since then, I am not the best person for bronchoscopies. After that first bronch, I would hear the little cart come down the aisle in the morning doing cha-chink, 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 and I thought, oh no, not again. So I really had to work with the team to say, this works for me, this doesn't work for me, this type of process works for me. So that was fine when I was in the hospital. Post-transplant bronchoscopies for your checkups, it's really a matter of working with your team to make sure that you're getting the right amount of sedation that works for you.
I can describe the first bronchoscopy I had inpatient that I can remember. I've been told I had one before then, and I don't remember that at all. But the first one I remember was awful. It was awful. The nurses, and I think even Dr. Kukrasia, were holding my hand saying, you're doing great, and I didn't feel like I was doing great at all. I had tears running down my face, felt like I was choking, and it was awful. However, on that bronchoscopy, I got to see the inside of my lungs, and it was really, really cool. I mean, it kind of made all the choking worthwhile, because it's like, oh my gosh, there are my lungs, and it's really cool. I don't know if it was worth it, but it was really cool. The outpatient bronchoscopies are a breeze. Gargling with the mouthwash, that's numbing mouthwash, is gross, but it's just gargling. I have an IV that gives me anti-nausea medication and a slight sedative, and once that starts, I'm all good to go. It's amazing how finely tuned the drugs are, because the hard part of the process starts and I'm out, and then it's done and I'm immediately awake, and it's like, oh, okay, we're done, all right. And it's like nothing ever happened. So don't sweat the outpatient bronchoscopies.
The first in-hospital bronchoscopy scared me to death, just the thought of it. And it's really apprehensive and nervous until we started. And the therapist, technician really taught me through it really well. it seemed uncomfortable, but once in my mind I realized it was okay. It wasn't too bad. I mean, it was fairly acceptable. A little sore afterwards, but it wasn't bad. The ones that I received after surgery and after I was released from the hospital, they really don't seem to bother me that much. I mean, it's the way they prepare your throat, it's fine. Yeah.
Describing the first bronchoscopy I had as an inpatient is kind of like describing drowning. There are two things you notice, or that you're trying to choke against the tube and you're really fighting to do that, which is a strain in and of itself. It's very hard, especially when you're not used to it. And then the other is you're going to have fluid in your lungs, and it's a very unusual feeling. And you have to expect that it's going to take a while to clear that. My first outpatient bronchoscopy was a little bit different than my inpatient experience. It was a little more controlled. It felt a little bit more mellow. You're still sore afterwards, but a lot of the feelings you have of the choking and whatnot aren't necessarily there. Plus, the in-hospital world and outpatient hospital world are a little bit different in that things are always a little bit more of a hurry in the hospital, even if it's routine. And so you just feel less rushed when you're doing it as an outpatient.